Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into medieval times, a period where people woke up every morning, looked at their surroundings, and collectively agreed, yes, this is fine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In medieval times, death wasn't a distant concept or an uncomfortable topic politely avoided at dinner. Death was a neighbor, a very quiet neighbor, one that never moved out and occasionally resurfaced after heavy rain. Graveyards were not peaceful, fenced-off spaces meant for reflection and whispering. They were public zones, thoroughfares, social areas. If you were late for market, you cut through the cemetery. If you needed a place to meet someone privately, you met them between two graves. If you were a child looking for somewhere to play, congratulations, you were now playing tag among the deceased. And nobody thought this was odd. Burials were temporary arrangements at best. Space was limited, bodies were plentiful, and medieval soil did not respect personal boundaries. Coffins collapsed, rain eroded graves, bones slowly emerged like they had unfinished business. Finding a skull after a storm wasn't a horror movie moment. It was a maintenance issue, the medieval equivalent of seeing a pothole and thinking, someone should probably deal with that. People reacted accordingly. They nudged bones aside with their feet, they stacked them near church walls, they reburied them loosely, the way you might tidy up a blanket that slipped off the couch. No screaming, no fainting, just quiet acceptance and mild inconvenience. Churchyards doubled as meeting spaces. Business deals were discussed next to headstones, arguments happened beside graves, children ran around while adults negotiated prices for bread, all under the watchful gaze of several generations of skeletons who had absolutely seen worse. And somehow, this didn't make medieval people morbid. It made them practical. When death is everywhere, it stops being dramatic. It becomes part of the environment, like mud, church bells, or that one neighbor who always smells faintly of sheep. Imagine growing up learning to walk while carefully avoiding grave markers. Imagine being told not to kick the skull because that belongs to someone. Imagine stepping over a femur on your way to buy vegetables and thinking, Again, to a medieval person, this wasn't creepy. It was convenient. Death wasn't hidden, feared, or denied. It was present, acknowledged, and quietly tolerated, like bad weather or an unpopular tax. And perhaps that's the creepiest thing of all, when something terrifying becomes so familiar that it barely registers anymore. At some point, medieval Europe ran into a problem that modern city planners would recognize immediately. There were simply too many dead people and not enough space to put them. Graveyards filled up fast because medieval life had a habit of ending suddenly and without much warning. When space ran out, medieval society did what it always did. It improvised calmly and with unsettling confidence. The solution was the ossuary. Instead of expanding cemeteries endlessly, old graves were dug up and the skeletons were removed once the flesh had done everyone the courtesy of disappearing. These bones were not discarded. They were recycled, stacked, sorted, very neatly, in fact, because nothing says respect like good bone management. Skulls were arranged in rows, femurs were piled like firewood, entire walls were built out of human remains, chapels were decorated with them, ceilings supported by them. In some places, bones were arranged into patterns and symbols just to show that, yes, this was intentional interior design, and people prayed there, not nervously, not quickly. They knelt, bowed their heads, and spoke softly, surrounded by thousands of empty eye sockets silently attending the service. This wasn't considered morbid, it was considered practical. Bones were reminders of mortality, sure, but they were also space-saving solutions. Medieval minimalism. The truly unsettling part is how unbothered everyone was. Children grew up attending church in rooms literally made of ancestors. Travelers visited ossuaries the way we visit museums. Locals gave directions like, turn left at the skull wall. Nobody felt the need to explain themselves. If anything, ossuaries were comforting. They represented order. The dead weren't lost. They were organized, cataloged, watching politely from the walls. Death had a place, and that place had shelves. And of course, this wasn't hidden away. Ossuaries were often attached to churches in the center of town. You didn't stumble into them by accident. You walked in purposely, nodded respectfully, respectfully to the bones, and continued with your prayers. Imagine explaining this to a modern audience. Yes, this is where we worship. Yes, those are skulls. No, we don't find it strange. Please stop screaming. To medieval people, this wasn't creepy. It was efficient. When death is everywhere, you don't hide it, you stack it neatly and move on. If living next to graves and praying beside bone walls didn't convince you medieval life had a unique relationship with fear, allow me to introduce medieval medicine, a field built on confidence, tradition, and the bold assumption that less blood is always better than more blood. Bloodletting was the medieval cure for almost everything. Fever, bloodletting. Headache, bloodletting. Feeling tired, sad, anxious, or mildly inconvenienced by existence, congratulations, it was time to remove some blood. Doctors believed the body was governed by humors, and illness came from imbalance. The solution was not rest, diet, or common sense. It was opening a vein and hoping for the best. And here's the fun part. Doctors weren't always the ones doing it. Barbers handled bloodletting. The same person who trimmed your beard and shaved your head could also decide today was a good day to drain you like a leaky barrel. This was not considered alarming. It was considered efficient. Why visit two professionals when one man with a blade could handle both hair and circulatory issues? The iconic red and white barber pole still exists today. And no, it is not decorative. The red represents blood, the white represents bandages. In other words, it's a centuries-old sign that says haircuts available, veins optional. The process itself was quick and confident. A small cut, a bowl placed beneath, blood flowing freely, while the practitioner nodded thoughtfully as if watching the answer to life's problems drip out in real time. If you started to feel dizzy, that meant it was working. If you fainted, that meant it was really working. Bloodletting was scheduled, too. Some people were bled regularly, even when healthy, just to stay balanced. Imagine booking a routine appointment to lose a portion of your vital fluids and walking out thinking, yes, much better. Of course, results varied. Some patients recovered, others became weaker, a few died. This was considered acceptable statistical noise. Medicine was still learning. The truly unsettling part isn't the practice itself, it's the faith people placed in it. Bloodletting wasn't questioned, it wasn't debated, it was trusted. Generations accepted it because it was normal, because respected authorities endorsed it, and because everyone else was doing it. To medieval people, blooding wasn't dangerous. Not bleeding was. And that quiet certainty that the path to health involved losing what keeps you alive might be the creepiest diagnosis of all. After medieval medicine decided that removing blood was a great idea, it naturally followed up with a second bold strategy: tasting bodily fluids, because when you don't have microscopes, lab tests, or basic hygiene standards, the human senses become medical instruments, and not the good ones. Urine was the star of medieval diagnostics. Doctors believed it carried vital information about the body's internal state, and they were absolutely right about one thing: it did carry information. Unfortunately, their method of collecting that information was intimate. A patient would arrive carrying a flask of urine, usually still warm, which was considered a helpful detail rather than a warning sign. The doctor would hold it up to the light, swirl it gently, and study its color with deep concentration. Pale meant one thing, dark meant another, cloudy meant something else entirely. This part alone already looks unsettling to modern eyes, but medieval doctors were just getting started. Next came the smell test, a careful sniff, sometimes accompanied by a thoughtful nod. This was not a joke. Smell was a diagnostic category. A strong odor suggested imbalance. A weak odor suggested weakness. At no point did anyone say, perhaps we should stop inhaling this. And then, in some cases, came the taste. Yes, doctors occasionally sampled urine. A small sip, a dab on the tongue, a quick judgment. Sweetness could indicate disease. Bitterness could indicate something else. The medieval doctor stood there, tongue slightly out, considering your internal organs like a wine critic evaluating a questionable